This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the backs there are. He backs it. He kicks it. Oh, the fall from Duursma. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing. He keeps going. 4 bounces. Joining the chorus. The Can't Lose Kangas AFLW premiers.
Hello and welcome back once again to North Pod. I bet you weren't expecting this. It's a drop. 5 weeks, 6 weeks in the making. I promise I didn't mean to drop off the face of the earth as soon as the AFL season or the home and away season finished, but boy, life has got on top of me. I just need a little rest, to be perfectly honest. We're back. Well, not sure what the frequency of the episodes is going to be, but we're going to do a couple of post-season episodes, touch base with the AFLW, and I guess, this episode is going to be a fair bit to get through just because I've missed so much. I'm probably not going to spend a heap of time focusing too much on it from a news perspective because there's a lot of stuff that's 3 or 4 weeks old and you've no doubt caught up with that. But I'll certainly go through things in terms of what my thoughts are on them and how I think we're tracking with certain things. So I guess that's what you can expect from this episode. I'm just going to kind of catch you up on the last 5 weeks or so. Not necessarily in chronological order, but somewhat grouped, I suppose. And then, I guess we'll have a look at the trade period, which has arrived. Free agency is open, and by the time you're listening to this, it might be a day away for the trade period, or potentially it's already open. So, I guess just to give you an update on myself, like work was really busy, family stuff really busy, and I just something had to give. Unfortunately, that was North Pod for a couple of weeks. So made it to the end of the season. Struggled to get there, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of balls in the air throughout the second half of the year, but we made it, and I really appreciate everyone for sticking around and for listening again if you're tuning in, because I'd understand if a few people have thought, all right, well, that's Jason done for the year. So let's jump into what's been happening since the last podcast. So we'll start with the list stuff. There has been a couple of re-signings. Cooper Trembath, Zach Banch, and Cal Coleman-Jones all contracted for an additional year, which, they were coming out of contract. So they're all contracted at the end of next year. Trembath, 100% makes sense. Those 3 games that he played were, probably one step short of phenomenal. Kicked 3 goals in each. Looked amazing, to be honest, playing in a really difficult role. So he definitely earned a contract for next year. No question marks there. And I think, I'm a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm wary because I think next year there's going to be a fair bit of expectation on him. Not to be Nick Larky or anything like that, but I think, people are going to be expecting these kicking 3 goals every week. And, that's not realistic. So I'm super pumped for the season the end of his season. I'm super pumped to see what he can do next year, but I also don't want to completely blow my expectations of him out of the water. Like I said, I think it's a difficult role to play, that sort of medium-sized key forward. I likened him to Jack Gunston at times throughout his 3-game patch, and I think that would be a fantastic result if he could be something like Jack Gunston, because he's not, physically he doesn't bring something unique. He's not super tall, but if he can be a forward that reads the game really well, has strong hands, accurate kick, all of those things, then I think there's potential for him. So certainly on board with him re-signing for next year. Zach Banch is an interesting one. I'm not opposed to it. It was just hard really to evaluate him too much in the time that he had in the team this year. Obviously made a big impact with that mark that we'll talk about shortly, that was nominated for Mark of the Year, but hard to evaluate his couple of games, particularly given they're at the end of the year. So I'm not opposed to signing him. Personally, I might have signed Cooper Harvey before Zach Banch, but I understand they're a little bit different. Cooper Harvey's more of a small forward that plays a marking role, whereas Banch is definitely not a marking player. He's a crummer. He's conventional. He can take a mark. Don't get me wrong, but he's not typically going to be a marking on the lead or your contested grabbing kind of player. He's that player that you're hoping is going to read the packs really well. So, look, for me, I don't mind the signing, but I certainly wasn't in the camp of, yes, we need to definitely sign him. So that's fine. And then we look at Cal Coleman-Jones, and that's one I really don't know how to feel about. I worry a little bit that it is a sympathy signing, that we're feeling bad for him given that he's had the Achilles that he suffered in 2024, and then he fought his way back from that and then did his calf in his first game back at AFL level. He played some okay football at VFL level this year before he got back into the senior side. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of North fans were expecting him to be shown the door. I guess it's a wait and see, definitely the last chance to show something. And, in theory, I think the player that he is perfect for us if he became that player. He's primarily a forward. He can definitely play in the ruck. He's tall. He can be a great mark. He can kick goals. All of that sounds great in theory. It's just that really the theory we haven't seen in practice really at all in his time at North Melbourne. So now he's had a serious lower leg injury, which is tough to come back from. Done a calf this year, which you wouldn't expect is going to impact him next year, but I guess it adds to the potential of him becoming a bit of an injury-prone player. Yeah, he's lucky to get a contract, I think, particularly when we look at who was delisted and who we still have to sign. I think there would be players ahead of the queue from him, in my opinion. In any case, it's just a year, so hopefully we can get a good look at him at AFL level next year, and then if he really impresses, great, we can give him another contract, and if not, we've given him all the opportunity possible. I mean, if he gets injured, it'll be the same as well. Like, there's no way that we're going to give him another year if he's injured again for all of next year. So that's a tough one, particularly when you think about how crucial a list spot is. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal. Like you say, well, the lists are 40 plus. You've got room, but we really need to be taking advantage of every list spot that we have, because that's the way that you find the diamonds in the rough and you develop players, is you've got everyone at least with a chance of being a future player in your best 23. And yeah, there's definite question marks over him. I think for me, it was a bit of a cut and run situation. But anyway, we have signed him. So they're the three that have signed since the end of the year. We've also delisted 4 at this stage. There'll definitely be more to come. Bryn Teakle, Callan Dawson, Eddie Ford and Miller Bergman. Really no complaints with any of them, no surprises there. I did wonder if we might give Teakle another year if we were going to cut CCJ, because you do need a little bit of ruck depth. But if we're keeping Cal Coleman-Jones, it absolutely makes sense that we get rid of Teakle. Coleman-Jones' ceiling, I think, is higher than Teakle for sure. But I think Teakle was a pretty reliable player when required. Like, he played every game once he started in 2024. Came in and didn't show a lot this year when Tristan Sherry went out of the side. But, I don't think he was awful. He just, he was playing his role. So I'll stop short of saying that he's unlucky. I don't know that he's unlucky, but it definitely was a coin toss. There it is, a coin toss between both him and Cal Coleman-Jones. Callan Dawson, I think we saw the writing was on the wall for him when he was not in the team for the second half of the year, and pretty similar for Eddie Ford. He didn't get on the park at all this year. I think the writing was on the wall for him. We've just got too many of those medium-sized marking forwards. He's a hard worker, Eddie Ford. I could definitely see him playing some VFL footy for someone and getting on a list in the future, potentially. But, if you can't get a game at North Melbourne, it's going to be tough to get a game somewhere else. I think it's pretty unlikely, unfortunately, for him that he'll get somewhere else. And then Bergman, it's tough. Obviously, copped the injury. Was it an ACL or an Achilles? I think it was an ACL that he did this year and missed most of the year. Unfortunate, but that, I guess I was expecting Cal Coleman-Jones to have the same fate as Miller Bergman. For me, he just didn't show enough, unfortunately, enough development. Goda seems to me to be a better prospect. Jackson Archer's a good prospect. Riley Hardiman. They've got too many of those medium-sized rebounding defenders that Bergman was never really going to cut it. So, those 4, make sense. I definitely think there'll be some more delistings as we go through trade period and figure out how many list spots we have and looking at the draft and that kind of thing. But 4 for now, and really no surprises with those 4. You can't imagine that those 4 were going to make us much better next year. And then the one signing, although I don't know that it's official as yet, but Charlie Spargo is going to be a free agent signing. Obviously coming across from Melbourne, premiership player. He's had a bit of an injury interrupted last couple of years, as well as just not being able to crack a spot in the Melbourne side at times. But we know he was a good player for a couple of years there, was part of their 2021 premiership. Look, I think from what I've seen, there's a lot of people that are a bit middling on this signing. And I understand that. Like, he's not an exciting player. He's not a key defender, which is what, we as fans, I think, are calling out for or crying out for as an established key defender. He's not that. But what I do like about the signing is, number one, it's a free agent signing, so we're not paying anything in terms of draft capital or players to get him, so that's a win. We're not paying him $1 million. I think we're probably giving you a good wage, but it's not going to be $1 million. So it's more or less a free hit. That we've got room in the salary cap for this kind of signing. It's not going to break the bank and stop us from making a different kind of signing. The other thing that I like about this is, he is a player that I think we need in that he knows how to play a defensive role. He's a hard runner. He's also pretty flexible. You could see him at half forward. I could also see him at half back. I know that he really hasn't played much of that role for Melbourne, but I could see that. He also could be a winger. We're still looking for some answers on the wing. So look, absolutely, this is not a signing that's going to completely change the outfit and change our prospects for next year. He's just not that kind of player, but he comes with premiership experience from another side, which I think is a win. You get an insight into how, that these kinds of things are built. You add that to Luke Parker, you add that to Jack Darling, Caleb Daniel. We've got now lots of different players from different teams that have won premierships that can bring some knowledge and skills from those sides. He's not old either. I think he might be 25, 26. Like, he's not an old player, Charlie Spargo. So, he's got time. And I think the fact that he is able to bring some defensive pressure and defensive principles is a win. So, I don't think he's a walk-up start into the side, but I definitely think that there's a chance that he plays in the round 1 side for next year, depending on how the rest of the trade period in free agency and the draft goes for us. So, yeah, look, I'm not skipping down the halls and singing all about it, but I don't think it's as bad as some people I saw were feeling or reacting to it. Beggars can't be choosers. I understand the sentiment that, when are we actually going to get a big signing? But at the end of the day, it's tough. St Kilda is making it look easy at the moment. In fairness, they're signing everyone and paying everyone, but I think they're in a better list spot than we are. They're high up the ladder, and they've got a lot of money. They have done a great job with managing their salary cap and front-ending some deals, so they've got some money to spend. So power to them. I hope that that's what we're doing at the moment when we don't have this plethora of superstars on the list. I hope we are doing some front-ending so that, potentially when we're on the rise, we're able to pay someone some big money or a couple of people some big money. I think about when we were able to bring Sean Higgins, Nick Del Santo and Jared Waite into the side, not all in the same year, but over the course of a couple of years, and what a massive difference that made to us in that those premiership, wouldn't it be nice, preliminary final seasons. Like, they were the cream on top. They were the things that didn't get us there, but they got us from being sort of, bottom half of the 8 type material or losing in the first week of finals to, being pretty competitive in some finals and making our way to some prelims. Particularly that one against West Coast. I always think that's the one that got away from us. I really felt like, anyway, we're going back 10 years now, but we were robbed in terms of the umpiring in that game from at least competing. Like, maybe we don't win it, but I thought we were playing some really good football. Anyway, in a time capsule going back 10 years at this point, Charlie Spargo is a solid signing, and he does improve our list. He might improve our team slightly, but he does improve our list. Even though he's a half forward, we've got plenty of those. He's a different type of half forward. He's, a hard-working defensive pressure. He can play in a wing. He can run. Yeah, I'm quietly optimistic about what he could bring for us next year. So that's kind of what has happened so far with our list. I'm sure you're across most of that if you've been following anything North Melbourne related over the past month or so. A couple of big events. have happened. We've had the Brownlow, we've had the Syd Barker Medal, so both of those have occurred. Not a lot to talk about from the Brownlow, really. I mentioned before, Zachy Bench was one of the 3 finalists for Mark of the Year, which was pretty exciting. Sam Darcy won it, which, he took a very similar mark to Zach Bench, but I think you could argue he might have bubbled it and dropped it and not quite controlled it. Didn't love that as the winner, but it's Mark of the Year. It's not really something to get too concerned about. It was nice to be represented by such a young player, an inexperienced player. It was a really nice mark, a different kind of mark to what you normally see winning Mark of the Year. It was a pretty weak year for Speckies, I think, but I think that's kind of the way the game is going at the moment with the way it's being played. In terms of our Brownlow results, it was LDU on top again. That's the second year in a row. I can't remember what it looked like in 2023, but I know that he and Harry Sheasel were out in front last year. And same again, LDU 11 votes, Harry Sheasel 10, Sherry 7, Simpkin 6, Tommy Powell, who hadn't gotten a Brownlow vote until this year, 5, McKercher 3, Comben, Larkey and Zerha all got 1 vote each. So not a lot of votes for us, as you'd expect in a season where we only won 5 games and had a draw. Yeah, not a lot to take out. It's pretty stock standard. Probably our best 2 players, or best 3 players, in fact, are the ones leading it. They're the 3 that led my North Podium. They're the 3 that led the best and fairest count. They're our 3 most standout players and have been for the past 2 years. So really no surprises that they're the ones that are being noticed by the umpires, but neither of them anywhere close, obviously, to Nick Dacos and Matt Rowell, who finished 2 and 1 respectively. And the Syd Barker, which there is a bit more to talk about from that. I'm sure you've seen that Sheasel and Sherry were the equal winners on 207 votes. Super year from both of them. I had Sheasel as winning the North Podium award, but in terms of who was winning it, if Sherry had played those extra 3 games, it would have been extremely close. LDU in 3rd, Luke Parker 4th, Simpkin 5th, Caleb Daniels 6th, McKercher 7, Tommy Powell 8, Cam Zerha 9, and Paul Curtis 10 is the top 10 in the Syd Barker Medal. So look, not a lot of surprise, and actually I was comparing it to my North Podium voting, and the top 10 is identical, not positionally, but just the players are identical, except for I had Nick Larkey in my top 10. He actually finished 11th in the Syd Barker, and I did not have Caleb Daniel in my top 10. I think he might have been 15th or 16th in the North Podium voting. So I was pretty pleased with that, actually, given I've tried to kind of model my voting after the same system that the coaches use. With the 4-3-2-1, and anyone can get as many as possible, etc., etc. They use the same voting system again for the Syd Barker for this year. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a little bit of a pat on the back for me, or a little bit, I guess, encouraging that the votes aren't completely different to the way that I was seeing the game. And yeah, not a massive surprise there, really, to be honest. I think Luke McDonald could have been in the top 10 if he'd played the whole year. He was having a good year and finished 17th, given he missed the second half of the year. Larkey did miss a lot of games to finish 11th. He would have finished in the top 10 as well had he finished out the year properly. So there's some good. I mean, having Toby Pink and Dylan Stevens up at 14th and 15th is, coming into the season, that's a big surprise. Both of them, I think, were surprise packets this year. Jacob Constanti in 16th, played all year. It didn't star in any way, but I think that does show that he was playing the role that he was brought into the side to do. And Phil Sullivan in his first year to finish 12th. I think he played every game except one. Finishing in 12th is a great effort by him. So I guess there's some positives from the leaderboard. In terms of some negatives, I mean, having Griffin Logue in 21st place, Aidan Core in 23rd place, Bailey Scott 25th. It's not a good look. They're all senior players that you would hope are, in the top 15, or ideally probably in the top 12, because you'd expect, Aidan Core and Griffin Logue, you'd be hoping are doing some really good work in the defensive half. Charlie Comben was 13th, so he's the taller defender that features. Caleb Daniel, the distributor, is in 6th. McKercher in 7th. Like, they're the distributing half-backs. They're in there. Finn O'Sullivan did spend some time at half-back as well. He's up there above them. Toby Pink above them. So even Luke McDonald and Riley Hardiman above them. So that's a concern for me that those players are down there. I mean, Zach Fisher didn't finish. He finished in 28th, but didn't play a lot of footy. Some of that through injury and some of that through form. So that's a concern. All three of those players that I mentioned, Core, Logue, and Bailey Scott, are all contracted for next year. I think Core and Scott have only got one more year, and Logue might have 2 off the top of my head. Both of them, I think, Core's age is not on his side, and Bailey Scott's form was just awful this year. Like, he had a down year last year, and he really went backwards again this year. So that's a concern for me, those senior players that aren't performing. I think it was probably a surprise for a lot of people to see Caleb Daniel as high as he was in 6th place. And it was a little bit of a surprise for me. I didn't expect to see him that high, but I definitely think it does speak to the fact that he's playing the role the coaches want him to play. Even though the fans at times get frustrated with it looking like he's indecisive and making some poor decisions. I trust the coaches are seeing the game in a different way or a slower way than we as regular fans are seeing it. And potentially a lot of what his mistakes are looking like, and not necessarily his mistakes, but more like team structure errors. I think it's really encouraging that we've recruited Luke Parker and Caleb Daniel, and the two of them have finished in the top 6 in the Brownlow. Like, on one hand, you go, gee, it's unfortunate that these new players that we've traded in are so much better than the players that we have. But on the other hand, you go, all right, well, the list management was great at the end of last season. You could argue about, did we pay too much for Caleb Daniel, but not in terms of his money, but in draft capital. But at the end of the day, he's finished 6th in the Brownlow. That would be good. He's finished 6th in the Syd Barker. I think he's held up his end of the bargain so far. And Luke Parker definitely, like, finishing 4th. He had a really strong, consistent year for us. So I guess that's my kind of takeaways from the Syd Barker voting. Obviously, you can go onto the North Melbourne website and check out the full votes if that's of interest to you. And like I said, I think it's a shame that we've got those senior players not performing. I think the other shame is that Big X would have definitely won had he not got himself suspended for those 3 games, given he tied with Shees. I've got no doubt that he would have polled well enough to win it outright. Like, nice for Shees to win his second one, but I think it would have been even better if, X could have outright won the best and fairest, because he just had another really strong year. Probably not as stand out as last year, but expectations for him were a little different this time. So I think you understand, or you have to take that into consideration, because at the end of the day, it's he went into this season with some expectation, whereas last year he did not. I guess at this point I'll just have a quick look at the North Podium voting. Like I said, I went through the fact that it's very similar to the Syd Barker top 10. Sheasel ended up winning on 31. Tristan Sherry had 26, and then LDU and Luke Parker are actually tied for 3rd on 24 votes. So they were up the top. McKercher in 5th place on 20 votes. Paul Curtis had 19. Simpkin and Powell and Cam Zerha are all on 15. And then Nick Larkey, that rounded out my top 10. O'Sullivan, Wardlaw, McDonald, Stevens, Daniel, Darling, Pink, Constanti, Trenbath gets down to 20th. So Trenbath in his 3 games at the end of the year, for me, that was enough for him to poll 5 votes and get into 20th spot, which is pretty impressive. In terms of just a couple of other tidbits from the way that I saw it, Harry Sheasel won on the back of just elite consistency. He polled in 17 games, which was 2 more than anyone else. He received 4 votes once. Only he and Tom Power were good enough to receive the 4 votes from me once each. Polling in 15 games were Sherry and Luke Parker, and polling in 14 games, LDU, Cole and McKercher. So, as you'd expect, the players are up the top of the ones that are polling more often. And then in terms of The types of votes, like I said, Sheasel and Tommy Powell had one each for the best on ground, four votes. The three I gave out a little bit more often. So Tristan Sherry actually had the most threes. He scored a 3 on 4 occasions, and threes, essentially played a really good game. Paul Curtis had 3 of those. Sheasel and LDU had 2, and then a couple had 1s. And then the 2s and the 1s, obviously a lot more of them. 2s is for a good game, and then 1 was for playing your role. Just having a look here, Sheasel and Luke Parker had 7 2s, so that they had the most of those, and then LDU and McKercher had 6 each. And then for the 1s, like I said, this is for playing your role. Interestingly, Dylan Stevens actually had the most 1 votes. He had 9 on 9 occasions did he get 1 vote. And in fact, he got 1 vote 9 times. He got 2-1 and then once, and then that's it. That was his 11 votes for the year. Tristan Sherry got 1 8 times, as did McKercher, as did Cam Zurhaar. Had a really consistent year, as did Cam Zurhaar. So I guess that's the top breakdowns in terms of who was voting how. And then I guess just worth noting. So here are the players that did play a game but didn't poll a vote. Zane Duursma, no votes. Bailey Scott, no votes. I don't remember if Darcy Tucker played a couple of games before his injury this year, because he did his back and didn't play most of the year. Anyway, he didn't poll a vote. Zach Vischer didn't poll. Cal Coleman-Jones played 30 minutes and didn't vote, so that makes sense. Jackson Archer broke down early in the year and didn't get a vote. Whitlock was a bit stiff and didn't get a vote. Finbar Maley, no votes. Callum Dawson, no votes. And Zach Banch, no votes. And obviously a handful of players that didn't play any games. So they're the ones at the bottom that really I didn't think either were contributing or playing their roles well enough to get some votes. And then obviously there's some players like Griffin Lowe, Geordie Payne and Will Phil and Brent Teakle actually all finished on 1 vote. So that's what it looked like. Like I said, very similar to the Syd Barker Medal up the top, which is interesting, I guess. It's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, congratulations to Harry Sheasel on just a consistent year. I thought Sherry was really, really strong. LDU, again, a pretty consistent year, just not as standout, I think, as last year. And I think sometimes it can be a bit rough because I do think it's really hard to watch the game and not bring a bit of your bias in terms of expectation to it. I do wonder if maybe that's why McKercher polled pretty highly for me, is because my expectations from the start of the season were pretty low, and then as the year goes on, you're expecting a little more. Anyway, that's what that looks like, and hopefully that gives you some insight into what the voting looked like for the North Podium. What else have we got to talk about here? Some coaching changes. Couple of coaching changes here. So Zane Littlejohn is a new recruit. He's coming across as a strategy coach. Well, that's the role that he's going to fulfill for us. Looks like he's going to look at game day strategy, look at trends across the competition, and I guess kind of be Alistair Clarkson's right-hand man in terms of assisting him with making strategic decisions on the field. He's come across from the Box Hill Hawks. He's been the coach there of that VFL side for a couple of years, maybe 3 years. Had a fair bit of success with that team. So that I think is cause for excitement. I do think we need a bit of an injection into that area of our game. Our strategy is lacking a little bit. I think at times we've been upset with our whole team defence. We've been upset with the way that we're not necessarily consistent with the way that we're attacking things. So, yeah, I think that's a really good appointment. It's always hard to assess the impact of the assistants in terms of the impact they're having, because it's less tangible. At the end of the day, I think it comes back to how well the player's executing it. But I think he's going to be good, or it sounds like he's going to be good in that role. And then a little bit of shifting around. Mickey Barlow's moving from a development role into the mids coach, replacing Lee Adams. That's a role that he'd had for a little while. And then Tom Lynch, he's going to move into the head of development. He has been obviously the VFL senior coach for us, and he's going to move into more of a development role, which is what Mickey Barlow was doing. So they're the main coaching changes at this stage. I think we're still looking for some more assistant coaches to join the ranks. But I guess it's just good to have a bit of an insight into what what is changing personnel-wise in that space for next year and whether or not we can expect some differences, like maybe Mickey Barlow's going to coach the midfielders a little bit differently than the way that Lee Adams was, and potentially things look different at stoppage. They look different in terms of whole ground defence and defensive running. Like that's I guess what we could potentially see. Tommy Lynch, I think, has a great mind for development, and hopefully he can work with those younger players and we see some skills development, because we know kicking's not a strength of ours and we're going to need it to be in the future. So there's some coaching changes, and then I wanted to have a look at just some other trade period stuff that's kind of been happening or being talked about but hasn't necessarily happened as yet. Probably the biggest one is the Jai Simpkin looking for a move out or gesturing to try and get out. Obviously, there's talk on the back of his exit meeting that he's looking for more midfield time, and he's not getting that at North Melbourne, and so he's seeing if there are other clubs potentially interested in putting him in a full-time midfield role. And there definitely would be sides where I think he'd be good enough as a midfielder to play as a first-choice midfielder. The trouble is his contract, and I guess it's an advantage for us, but I do think his contract doesn't look too pretty to other teams. He's got a long one. I think he might have 4 more years on his deal, and it's not cheap. So I would be surprised if another team is able to prize him out, just from the perspective of the salary cap cost is high, and there's also of course going to be a trade value that's pretty high that we'd be asking for our captain as well. So it would be really interesting to know to what extent he wants out, whether he's just seeing what the market is, because he's captain, and it's a strange trade period where we've got at least four captains that are leaving or thinking about leaving, or there's talk they might leave. Jack Steele's the other one that's a bit of a maybe at St Kilda, but we've seen Oscar Allen and Zach Merritt are both either definitely leaving or going to leave, thinking about how to leave. So to have 4 captains thinking about it in one trade period is quite something. Yeah, it's a tough one. I was chatting on hashtag Kangaroos earlier in the week. Go and have a listen to that episode if you haven't. I was on with Dean and also Josh from further north about whether or not he can return as captain next year off the back of this. I wonder if he won't, just because the players may not vote for him to be next year. It's a tough one. Like I said, you don't know to what extent he was trying to get out, and if it's just a conversational thing. It's really impossible to know from the outside, but I think from my perspective, it's a business. I don't necessarily, unless he's absolutely burning bridges, I don't think he necessarily has to step down from the captaincy, but I could absolutely see an argument for moving on and potentially having Sheasel or Larkey in the role. Personally, I think I'd go for Larkey. It's always a bit of an iffy one to have a forward as your captain, I think, but I wonder if Larkey could do it for a couple of years and then hand it over to Shees. I just don't know that the captaincy is a burden that Shees needs at this point in his career, particularly given he had a year where he probably didn't reach the heights that we were hoping for him, or that we thought that he could. Anyway, this will all play out, of course, over the next few months. Like I said, I don't expect Jai Simpkin to leave just because I can't see how a deal would get done that would satisfy us, and it would have to, because we've got a contract with him. If it was going to be a trade, it'd need to be a really good player coming back, like a key defender type player, for example, or some significant draft capital, and I think we'd be looking at future drafts as opposed to this one. Maybe not too far into the draft with Tassie coming in, but yeah, I mean this draft is already so compromised, and it's not supposed to be a very strong one. So yeah, I think that's where we'd be at. We'd be looking for a significant player in return. And the type of player we might be looking for is, a better version of Jai Sarong, who is someone that we've been linked to. We're definitely pursuing him. Hawthorn player, I think he was a pick in the 50s, Jai Sarong, so he's not someone that was identified as an elite talent at junior level, but has been stuck on the Hawthorn list for 4 years behind some pretty good key defenders, particularly with the way that the Hawks have traded over the last couple of years. So didn't play a game this year, did play in the semi-final loss for the Hawks the year before. I think he's played 10 games maybe across his career, so not a heap of exposed form at AFL level. He's a little bit undersized. He's more of your third tall, potentially a second tall at a pinch. So look, it looks as though maybe it's not going to go our way, and he might end up at either Fremantle or Sydney, and maybe by the time you're listening to this, he's already made a decision. But look, I wouldn't say no to him. I think we can't say no to more defenders. And I think there's potential for him to be an AFL level defender. It's one of those ones where you can understand why he's stuck behind, top players like Barras and Battle, and James Sicily. Like, he's just not going to get a game ahead of them. They're all really good players, so it's not like he's a really bad player that's stuck behind some average players. Because I think the argument is, why do we want to pick up these players that can't get a game for someone else? But if it's a depth in a certain position issue, I think it's reasonable. So look, we'll see how that pursuit goes. It's always tough for us to recruit players, so I'm going with pretty low expectations. Yeah, I think it's important not to get our hopes too high with this kind of thing. The draft is, at this stage, the best place for us to select the players that we're looking for, the type of players that we're looking for. We've seen that over the last few drafts with Will Dawson and Matt Whitlock. We have identified some tools that we're interested in. Taylor Goad, the same. So, look, we'll see how that goes with Jai Sarong. I'm optimistic, but I'm not absolutely selling the farm for him. And then the other bit of scuttlebutt, I guess, or something that's been talked about is the potential for Syd Duursma to leave or to be traded. 2 years in, he's a number 4 draft pick. He's got one more year on his deal, so we do hold a contract with him. For me, I think it's more likely that he'll be traded at the end of next year. He'll be out of the contract. Much easier for him to force a move at that point. I just think, given his, where we took him in the draft, we'll be looking for a lot, and I don't think other teams are going to be wanting to offer it up. Again, on hashtag Kangaroos, I said if a team came with, a future first, I'd definitely look at it. It wouldn't have to be, a first that you expect to be high. It could be a side in the top 8 that maybe their pick's going to end up 10, 11, 12, 13. I might take that for Syd Duursma at this point. His value has definitely dropped, given he hasn't been able to play much good senior football this year and last year either. So, yeah, I would look at that for sure, but Essendon's the one that seems to be sniffing around, potentially reuniting with his brother. Look, I just don't see it happening this year unless some things change, and I wouldn't be too upset either way. If we keep him, we get to see if potentially he can turn it around next year, great. And if not, we get something for him and we cash in while we can. I don't mind that either. So they're probably the 3 biggest stories North Melbourne related that are floating around. Simpkin, I don't think will leave. Syd Duursma, I don't think will leave, and I don't think we'll get Jai Sarong. So there's your hot tips for the trade period at this stage. But we'll see what happens. Anything can happen in trade period, and probably won't for a week or so. But things do happen. And then, the last thing that I want to have a look at for the men's side before we have a quick look at the AFLW is the players that are still not contracted for next year. So Cooper Harvey, Darcy Tucker, Finbar Maley, Geordie Payne and Will Phil. They are the 5 that do not have a contract as yet. I have no doubt that some or all of them will be delisted, so it's just a matter of, do we keep any of them, really? I'm not exactly sure on our list numbers how many of them we're going to have to give up, and obviously that'll depend on if we are able to bring some players in and how many picks we want to take at the draft. We know we don't have our first round pick this year. We've given it away last year to Richmond. It'll be interesting to see if it does end up as pick 3 or how far it might get shifted back. Well, actually, it won't be 3 because West Coast is going to get some compo for Oscar Allen. So I think at this stage it's probably 4 or 5. Anyway, we'll see how far it does shift backwards. In any case, Cooper Harvey for me is the top priority of those 5. Which, if you told me I was going to say that last year, I would say you were dreaming. I'm shocked that he actually got a contract for this year. And then the last third of the year, I thought he played some really promising footy. I think he's worth contracting and sticking around. I know he plays in a position that we've got plenty of players in, but for me, I would have signed him before I signed Zach Banch, to be honest. So he's the one that I think is most likely to get a contract. Probably next most likely might be Geordie Payne or Finbar Maley. Both of them are really hard to read. I think if Harvey is contracted, it's really hard to see Payne sticking around just because they're essentially the same player. So if Harvey stays, I think Payne goes. We saw a couple of his games in the last part of the year. He looked okay. He didn't look too bad. But it's whether or not the year and a half that he spent on the list, he's done enough to show that he could be a really crucial AFL cog for us. Finbar Maley, we know he's a really good mark. Does he do enough of the other stuff is the question mark on him. So, look, he's a chance if we want to go with an extra tall into next year. I think he showed a little bit with his marking, but we know his kicking is a question mark. So if I had to guess, I think he'll probably miss the cut. Darcy Tucker had a back injury for most of the year. I would be so happy for us to move on from him, but I worry maybe we go down the similar route to what we've done with CCJ. And then, so if I had to pick right now, I'd say he might get delisted. And then the last one, Willfield, look, it hurts, but I just can't see us keeping him on the list. There might be a team that, wants to trade a 4th or 5th round pick or something like that for him just to make it easier to pick him up potentially. I can't see him staying on the list for next year, which hurts. I think he has a lot of really good leadership potential. I think he seems like a ripper bloke. Obviously, we invested really heavily in him with that pick 3, but yeah, it just doesn't look like it's worked out in the footy field. So I expect him to be delisted as well. So of those 5, really Cooper Harvey's the one that I think might stick around. It does depend on how many list spots, like I said. So if I had to pick a second one, I think it'd be Finbar Maley, like Cooper Harvey number 1. Finbar Maley 2, and then maybe Willfield after that, but I can't see that happening. So we'll have to wait and see. I expect we'll probably have another round of delistings after the trade period ends. That's when it would make sense to me to cut your last ones, and then we'll have a look at how many we're expecting to take at the draft, at the rookie draft. Because really, that's kind of when you have to have your list set. I think next episode I'm going to have a look at what I'm looking or seeing in the best 23 based on these changes and what's happened across season 2025. So you can look forward to that in the next episode. I'll just close this one out with a bit of a AFLW recap. We are still undefeated. An 8-0 start to the season. Phenomenal play still. Had a bad first quarter against Essendon a week or 2 ago, but recovered to pretty comfortably beat them. And we march on. I think we've got 20 wins or 20 games undefeated in a row, obviously with that draw to Geelong early last year, kind of blemishing that record slightly. But it's an unbelievable winning streak and an unbeaten streak from an unbelievable side. I've tried to watch as much of it as possible, but like I've said, life's been really lifing recently, so I have missed some parts, and some games I've just had to watch the highlights. But there's been some phenomenal play. Bogue is the big one. Like, what a player we've found there. I know she was on our list last year and didn't get a game, but she's essentially come in and replaced what Neve Martin was doing for us last year and some. She has been phenomenal. She's one of the highest goal kickers for the season for AFLW. She's lighting it up. She's the way that she just bursts, and she's a phenomenal player. What a find, given we're the premiership side, to find a player like that, hiding in plain sight, as it were. Another Irish woman, but she's been phenomenal. Just really amazing that we've been able to replace or upgrade a position like that. My understanding is that Martin's back in Ireland at the moment, but she's still on the list technically, but we're certainly not missing her with the way that Bogue's playing. We've navigated some injuries. Jazzy Garner had to miss a couple of games. O'Loughlin and Gatt are currently injured and missing larger chunks. So, we've been able to navigate that and keep winning, which is important and which is really encouraging. And I think, it looks as though we're priming for another big final series. I'm not arrogant or confident enough to say that, we're shoo-ins for the premiership again, but getting the monkey off the back last year, I think, is helpful. They know now that they can do it in the big games against the big sides, and we've been able to beat Brisbane a couple of weeks ago, which, just reinforces how strong we are. So we really haven't looked to have been challenged too much in the 8 games so far. We've got a couple more to get through before finals time, but we're looking very strong again, which is super encouraging, and hopefully we can break the record that recently where the premiership sides typically been beaten the next year in the grand final. Hopefully we can sort that out. And make a difference this year again, the AFLW. Yeah, that I think is going to do us for this episode. I kind of just wanted to go through everything that's been happening in the last 5 or 6 weeks whilst I haven't been podding, and just go through my thoughts on big picture, what's been happening. Like I said, I do expect and want to be back over the next couple of weeks and recapping the trades and having a look at what I got right and wrong in the pre-season. So there's definitely more to come, and I'll touch base with the AFLW as well. Like I said, I'm sorry that I disappeared for a month or so there. Things just got a bit busy for me. Got a lot of things going on. So hope to get back to potting each week now for the next little while. Thank you for listening and for sticking around and for not giving up on the podcast if you're listening this long. And it's an optimistic time of year. I know that there's plenty of doom and gloom in terms of the fact that no one wants to come to North. If Charlie Spargo is the best we can do, we aren't going well. But at the end of the day, we've got to take what we can get. And I'm hoping that we can stay positive through this trade period and go into the draft with some level of excitement. It's not going to be as exciting as we've seen over the past couple of seasons with those high draft picks, but you never know what you can find. There's plenty of players that have been picked in the second and third round and gone on to be phenomenal players. So we've got to hope that we're going to be able to do that this season. Like I said, I'll speak to you soon. Have a wonderful week. The weather in Melbourne seems to be shoring up a little bit and the sun's coming out, which is positive. Have a great week, and I'll speak to you soon. As always, it's been a little while. Let me see if I can get it right. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X, or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.